I am super excited for what we're starting here today. This young lady is Amanda Sohn. I know her from church, and I discovered a few months ago that she is also an artist. I didn't realize how good of an artist she is. I have never really been looking to be an art teacher. I'd rather make stuff than teach other people how to make stuff. But she's an exception. She is that good. And so what we're starting today is going to be a series of maybe 4, 5, 6 videos where we're going to work together. And we're both going to make the very same painting at the same time. Or at least we'll be working from exactly the same reference material at the same time. You'll see it in a few minutes. She's positioned so her easel is here and mine's here, and so she'll be making the same painting, and at the same time I'm making that painting, and I'll be able to tell her things as I go, and she'll be able to ask questions and see what I'm doing, and it's kind of an experiment. So we'll see how it goes. So welcome. I'm excited. Are you excited?
Yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah.
A little bit?
Very excited.
Okay. So that's the introduction. We're gonna move next to, I'm gonna show you one of her paintings that she's already done. And we'll talk about it for a couple of minutes. And then we'll move into the studio and start working. So off we go. Okay, this is the first time I'm seeing this painting. Tell us who this is of.
This is Lorna Turner, and she's an actress from the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked her movies, and so I wanted to draw her.
Very good. And I'm guessing you worked from a photograph?
Yes.
You kind of have to. She's not around to model for us anymore. Okay. Well, this is the first time I'm really seeing this. First of all, we'll acknowledge the fact that there's some damage to the glass or the covering on this. Amanda's family a few months ago had a house fire, and some of her work got damaged, and so we're going to put that down to that experience. So I'm looking at this and, evaluating this in real time. There are things happening that still look like student work. You're still kind of figuring things out, which is fine because that's where you're at. But there are other things that are working so well. I want to know if you know how good it is, if you knew what you were doing. Is this pure talent and an accident, or were you doing it consciously and deliberately? Let's talk about this eye.
So do you mean like the shape or the highlights and stuff?
Well, the highlights are brilliant, and the fact that you made the whites of the eye gray.
Oh yeah, that was intentional.
Yeah, and that's reality. They're not. The whites are not white, and the highlights are brilliant. The way as she turns her eye to look off to the side, the way her iris disappears into the shadow cast by her eyelid. That's brilliant stuff right there. Most beginner artists feel this need to put a big heavy line around every detail, every shape, just like a cartoon. Mm-hmm. Another place where you're really shining is how soft and subtle the corner of her other eye is. You've got the detail right there on that other eye where you can see that the lids have a bit of a shelf because they have thickness. They stand up above and apart from the eyeball, and so there's a little bit of a shelf under the iris and the pupil iris. The colory thing in the middle of the eyeball. Another place where this is just brilliant is the nose. This edge, it's distinct and yet it stays subtle. The nostril that's off the side and the subtleness of this whole area is just terrific. There's a little bit of structural shape that's getting lost right there. But coming back over to this, the other nostril, you know, there's, whether it's instinct or accident, you're just crushing it in some of these details. Her mouth is particularly awesome, and the teeth. To have done those teeth so subtly and so beautifully. Did you understand what you were doing when you made this tooth so dark, and you know, dark gray, lighter gray, little bit of a highlight, but a highlight that's not all the way white? I mean, how conscious were you of that being the right way to do things?
Not very, I don't think. I just was working off the photograph.
Right. So first off, you got brilliant observational skills to be able to look at a photograph and render it so beautifully is pretty impressive. Another thing that I'm loving is the hair. And they had really complicated hairdos in the 40s. But what you did with your line work, the pencil work underneath paint, because it looks like you painted watercolor or acrylic on top of pencil drawing.
Yes.
Is that right? The way your pencil work topographically follows the flow of what the hair would be doing. How conscious were you of that decision?
I don't know. What do you mean by conscious?
Well, what I mean is you were doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. Did you know you were doing the right thing and know why it's the right thing? Or was this more instinct and accident?
I think it's probably more instinct or accident.
Which is fair, which is fine, because that's where a lot of people start. That's what I guess you could call that raw talent. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that when I saw your work made me go, whoa, this girl is way better than I was at her age, and can be better than everybody else in the world if she wants to do this and get started now in developing the consciousness of, you know, starting to learn the skills, starting to master what the right things to do are and why they're the right things to do it. So it goes a little bit from, you ever pound a nail in with the bottom of a screwdriver?
Yeah.
And it got the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the right thing and doing it consciously is more like when you get to the point of you have a screw to put in and you know exactly which screwdriver to go looking for. So you go into your toolkit and you pick the one that's the right size and the right shape, because the square-headed screwdrivers are just not going to work with a Phillips head screw, no matter how hard you try. And that's what I mean by starting to do the right things and doing it consciously. You know that's the right screwdriver for that screw. It's not instinct and it's not accident. You go right to the right thing. So, the background is, it's fine. The edge here, I kind of love this edge. One of the things you're doing that reveals a beginner level is lots and lots of sharp edges. Mm. That's why I love this eye so much, because that's a very soft edge between the iris and the inside of that eyelid that's turning away, going into the corner of the eye. That's what you call a soft edge. You didn't feel the need to put a big neon sign around it and say, look, this is different from that. Most other places you've got very hard edges. The nose, you've got lots of beautiful soft edges. The mouth, lots of beautiful soft edges. The mouth looking between the lips and seeing the teeth, beautiful soft edges. Most people don't use enough soft edges in their artwork. And I think that's partly because we're all raised on a diet of cartoons. Yeah. And in cartoons, everything has got this fat black line around all the important details. And so we just mimic what we've been seeing all of our lives. You get a lot of power and a lot of subtlety when you use more soft edges. And so a place like this, where the edge of the hair meets the background, if that were blurred a whole lot more, that would help sell the idea that her face is turning away and receding into the background. things like that. So, soft edge part of the hair there, or where her shoulder meets the chair that she's sitting in, where the edge of the chair meets the background. You kind of accidentally got a little bit of that going on when the paint bled a little bit on you. And that's the kind of thing that you can start to harness on purpose, like just little soft edges here and there. And because we've all been raised on such a heavy diet of cartoons, and our instinct is to go right, delineate everything, hard edges around everything, it's almost impossible to use too many soft, blurred edges, because it'll start driving you crazy. If you start going, oh, there's too many, you're probably just right. Because we're programmed to go in the opposite direction. Her ear has got beautiful lost edges, soft edges. So, here's an example of where Amanda's currently at, and it's a very high level for a beginner artist. Some of it's accidental and instinctive, and that's okay. That reveals her talent and her potential. So, through study, and I may be part of that, we'll see. That's what this experiment's about as a beginning place, is to help her get to that level of doing the right things, knowing you're doing the right things, and knowing why it's the right thing, to move from instinct to consciousness. So, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, no. I need a pencil. No.
Okay.
I don't want your pencil. I want my pencil. Okay, so like I said, we're both going to be working from this photograph. I'm going to do work over here, Anna's going to work over there. If I have something I think she needs to know, I'll just call it out, and I'll be right here, and she can ask me questions about anything, and we'll just be working in tandem and see what turns out. So, the first thing, I told you before we started rolling, so on the references that I work with, I've got a grid that corresponds to a 1-inch grid that I draw on the canvases. I don't draw it all the way to the edge. The empty edge is inch number 1. So, and some of the lines have a circle at the end. Those are the center lines, and there's a blue line that's the center line on the references. The rest is a red grid. And that just helps me get oriented. So I can look at the reference photo, I look at the center line, find the center line on my canvas, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 5th square, a little more than halfway down, is the first place that the image intersects with the grid. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a little more than halfway down, is where the top of his hair intersects with that grid. And I move over, look at the next intersection, make a hash mark there, and I just walk around the whole outside of the image, making little hash marks at the intersections of the image with the grid. And you can do this with the internal details as well, and we'll get to that. But that's what's going on. And then once we've got our hash marks we start connecting the dots and filling in the image. We'll have to talk about what to do with the bottom, but we'll deal with that when we get there.
Got it.
But this is how I can make a perfect enlargement of my references that are on 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, or any size, and a perfect enlargement onto the size canvas that I want to use. So that's what this whole system is about.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
All right. As we progress with this experiment, what you'll start to see is that I've broken my process down into stages to where I'm only dealing with one or a couple issues at a time. I'm not a direct painter. There are people who get the image up on the canvas at the same time that they're adding color, at the same time they're dealing with light and shade, all at the same time, and when they're done, it's done.
Yeah.
I'm what they call an indirect painter, so what we'll be doing is, we get the drawing on, and all we're dealing with is the drawing, getting details in the right places. And then we'll start painting. We'll start with the face, the flesh details, and we'll be painting in just a limited couple of colors, basically like a black and white drawing you're painting. And so, because we'll have the details all in the right place, the only thing we're worried about dealing with at that point is light and shade. And then after that's dry, the session after that is session after the session after.
Mm-hmm.
We'll put a layer of color over the monochrome painting we did of the flesh tones. And at that point, we'll be only concentrating on color. And so it's just another way of working. There's not necessarily a right way or wrong way in art. This is one of the reasons, one of the things we're talking about when I say art is subjective.
Mm-hmm.
An artist's process is the way that an artist gets from point A to point B being the result they were looking for. And so however you manage to get yourself from point A to point B, if you can handle all those issues at the same time, like some artists can, or if you're like me and you start losing track of what you're doing, and you have to break it all down into bite-sized pieces, well, that's your process, and that's how you get from point A to point B, and the end result is the only thing people are buying.
Mm-hmm.
They're not buying how you got there. They may find it anecdotally interesting, but that's not what they care about the most. So that's one thing you'll discover in the art world. Lots of artists, it's like a hobby. They love to invalidate the process of other artists. It's like, well, that's not how you do that, and that doesn't count, and you didn't do it my way. It's like, well, they weren't your customers anyway, and they were never going to be, so who cares what they think?
Yeah.
Is what I say. But it is kind of a pastime. If you listen to other artists, it's you'll hear a lot of talk about, the right way, the wrong way, and this is valid and that's not legitimate. And like, well, the only people who care about that stuff are artists.
So true.
And I have to acknowledge right off the bat that working from this particular photograph, it's kind of like a special challenge and a big advantage at the same time. Mm-hmm. Oops, you're right, because what I mean is when we paint it, we're going to paint it in lifelike colors. We'll give a color to the tunic and a different color to the robe, and flesh color in the flesh and hair color in the hair and the beard.
Mm-hmm.
But right now it's all monochromatic color.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to take your special artist goggles to look at this monochromatic thing and make decisions about those colors later on. But, so that's the disadvantage. That could throw you or present a little bit of a special challenge. But it's also an advantage or an opportunity as a learning exercise, because it is all monochromatic. All you can see are shapes and shade. You can't be distracted by the colors in this at this stage. So it cuts both ways. This stage of things, this is not the time. This is the time to be compulsive about getting details in the right place, but it's not the time to get compulsive about making a beautiful drawing. So it's kind of a distribution of energy. So you want to put your energy in the right place.
Yes.
So I'm Brent's son. I'm Amanda's dad, just kind of off camera observing, and really grateful for Cameron taking the time to teach Amanda and help her develop her talents. And you know, I say we're doing this. This is the first time that Amanda's ever used a grid system to be able to place things. She's done everything just by eye and located it. And so one of the things that we were talking about off camera a little bit was that Cameron is, you know, obviously very quickly getting the structure in, and it's coming around very, very rapidly. And so, you know, how many years have you been doing this, Cameron?
I've lost track. I've been using the grid enlargement system probably for at least a decade, maybe more like 15 years. And I have lots and lots of experience of getting started and suddenly discovering that I miscounted somewhere, and the detail I'm now working on is a lot closer to an edge than it was supposed to be, and I've got to backtrack and start over. So I have lots of experience with that.
So now with that then is one of the keys for Amanda in this art lesson and this, you know, doing this is to ensure that she's counting, you know, taking a little more time and counting
Yes.
where she's at and focusing on making sure things are precise rather than necessarily starting to color on.
Yes, precisely. To just really focus on trying to get things in the right place. It's a strange paradox, because on the one hand, you need to be very careful about getting your details in the right place. And at the same time, you don't want to be too precious about the drawing. Get too uptight about making a beautiful drawing or, you know, in a way, it sounds, I don't know what it sounds like, but this is sort of a do-it-yourself way of creating a paint-by-numbers scheme.
That makes sense.
It's kind of what I'm doing. And, you know, the way it progresses with each of the stages that I do in a painting is I'm working in ever-collapsing zones of focus. So right now it's the macro focus, and it's the whole composition and getting details in the right place.
Right, so it's...
And right now it's the perimeter mostly. And
right,
so,
exactly.
You know, like hair, but, you know, do I have to do a precise reconstruction of the hair as it appears in this sculpture? Or is good enough good enough? For me, good enough is good enough. And so I will make editorial changes on the fly, and I'm fine with that. Perhaps because I have the experience of doing a few hundred of these to know what I can do with the ad lib, and you know what's critical and what's not so critical. So there is a bit of that going on, and you know, as a teacher, this is an interesting exercise because I don't know how much of that I do unconsciously.
Well, that's part of why I wanted to, you know, kind of chime in.
Yeah, that's a
and
fair
kind of
point.
bring that out, because I think that really, you know, when you do something, it becomes so natural and basically effortless. So when you're trying to I mean, it's just kind of been interesting. I mean, Amanda's super talented.
Yes.
In her, you know, in her freestyle drawing. I mean, like she'll sit there and just look at her birds and draw them, and you know, and do, or to look at her brothers or her sister and draw them, and just, you know, not have any kind of, you know, really it's all just free flowing rather than having any kind of structure behind it.
Right.
Whereas this is really kind of interesting to where, you know, you're getting it framed properly, but in those, you know, freestyle drawings, it's not necessarily, you know, you're not centered necessarily, or you're not, you know, it's not you know, a portrait type of drawing, if you would. So it's interesting that you mentioned that it was a paint by numbers, you know, style, and
right.
you know, and so it's, which is really fascinating. And then, like you said, I mean, you can take some liberties with different things and put your own style into it, and I'm sure Amanda will be able to do some of that as well as she does this. But it was just kind of fascinating to watch the two of you, you know, and how quickly you were able to sketch it. I was really just, you know, shocked at how fast the outline really came to be a picture that you could see. So that's really cool.
Okay. And you know, in the interest of full disclosure, one of the reasons I use the grid is because I am terrible at sight sizing, which, based on Lana Turner, Amanda is pretty awesome at sight sizing, looking at an image and getting it, you know, looking at an image and drawing from the image and getting the proportions and the details in the right place. That is not one of her weaknesses. She's actually really good at that. I am really terrible at that because I guess it's a hand-eye connection thing.
Right.
But I look at something when I'm sight sizing a drawing, and my hand always makes bigger movements than should be. And so I'll start off fine, but things, as they move out from the center of focus,
Right.
I get more and more distorted.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to have that as balance. Right. I mean, it just really keeps the, you know, give it in that reference point.
Right, and so, you know, I'm doing what works for me, what helps me get from A to B, and produces the results that I want to end up with. And so if somebody wants to say this is amateurish and I should be better at sight sizing, and well, maybe they're right. But nobody's buying my sight sizing ability, they're buying the finished painting. And so
Exactly. Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, just as a, very, very amateur, artist, and in fact, my first job in the Army was actually as the multimedia illustrator. So that was the extent of the art school I went to. So I was not very, very good at especially portraits and different things. So I did okay on a couple of things, but I really like digital media a lot more. But just the ability to, we did use it. The way we did it was we projected it. We had a projector basically that projected it on, and then you just outlined it over, through the projection essentially.
Right.
And so this is this method is, I think, really neat to be able to get essentially do that without, having the projector and, having to stand in front of it.
This is what you can do when you don't have a projector, which I haven't. But I also, I plan on getting a projector at some point, but one thing that worries me a little bit, and I might stick with the grid forever even when I have a projector, because with a projector, you can have parallax distortion as well. And so,
yeah, exactly.
I put my image in the projector, and if I don't have it at exactly the right distance and exactly the right orientation this way, everything lined up perfectly with, the angle of the canvas and the angle of the attack from the projector, and, it could still be distorted.
Exactly. Whereas the grid prevents that.
Flawless
Yeah.
enlargement. So I don't know.
Yeah, I've never seen it done like this before, so it's just fascinating to me. So it's just I really appreciate you introducing Amanda to this, concept and helping her, further develop and see something in a different way and do something. She's basically 100% self-taught and watch videos and things like that, and obviously she has a lot of God-given natural talent with it. So I again really appreciate you taking the time to help her develop that more and learn new methods.
It's all right. It's my pleasure. That's one of the reasons I was keen to do this, is when I found out that she was that good and mostly self-taught from watching YouTube videos. What are the things about art making that it's actually a worthwhile endeavor for everybody to play in, even if they don't feel talented, even if they don't plan on being an artist? It teaches you to see what you are looking at. Does that make sense? Think of the CBS logo. It's a circle. Well, let's say a circle inside of an almond, inside of a circle. That's a very abstract and reasonable depiction of a human eye.
Right.
It's symbol of eye. But real eyes, like we were saying earlier, the eyelids have mass. And the eye is a sphere, but the pupil, or the iris, is like a dome standing out on top of the sphere. And unless somebody is excited or startled, a portion of it is almost always covered, so you never see the full circle of the iris, or rarely see it. In fact, if you see the full circle of the iris, you know somebody's excited. Mm-hmm. And the top eyelid, because it has thickness, casts a shadow, which impacts the way the pupil looks. That gets a bit blurs into the shadow, and then the highlight will sometimes cut across it, but will never invade the shadow cast by the, on and on and on. The kind of details you only know about when you've learned to look longer and see what you're looking at.
Right.
Most of it, the world is just too complicated. right? So the brain is always looking for ways to be efficient. It's what can I safely ignore? That's what the brain's asking all the time. What can I safely ignore? And so we see symbols. We see ideas about things. We frequently don't see the things we're looking at. And art making forces us to slow down and look longer and start seeing what we're actually looking at.
Especially with today's distractions, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's attention spans are, 2 seconds now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, next squirrel, type of thing. And,
Doug from Up?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, you get so distracted, so to be able to stop and focus on making art and trying to replicate something and paying attention to details forces you to, have your attention drawn and focused for a much longer period of time.
And that's not to say that's easy. I mean, that is painful. Sometimes it's...
Well, I think that's one thing the grid does too, though, right? I mean, it just helps you to, you have to, count and make sure that you're... So it just, to me, it's just a really fascinating, way to do it from that, because you have to focus on how many spots. Like Amanda's right now counting over to make sure she's, putting points in at the right place and everything. So I just think it's really neat.
Yeah. Here's something that people don't appreciate, and why would they? Why would they even think about it? But for me as a professional artist, this is not a relaxed, joy-filled, passive activity. The way people think of hobbies, and art making frequently gets put in to the hobby category because that's where a lot of people engage with it, and they draw or they paint or whatever for enjoyment, and it's their hobby, it's their happy place or whatever. And that's not to say I don't enjoy it, I love it. But for me, it's like a ravenous need. I get visions of things that I must try to create because I want to live in a world where those things exist. And it's more like going to the gym for me.
Right.
It's a battle to get there. It's work to do the workout, and you're exhausted at the end of it, and your attention is fried after focusing on the grid for so long, or the whatever stage I'm working on. It's just it's intensive. It's like HIIT training, high intensity.
Right.
And I'm just fried at the end of it. And in fact, it was funny. It was slightly embarrassing, but it was funny when I was in art school. I was in a studio class, and the professor liked to... He would just talk, and you learn pretty quick that if you didn't just keep working while he talked, you'd never do anything. So you had to learn to just work while he talked and listen, gather what you could. And so I was working away and he was talking away, and I was only half listening because I was involved with what I was doing. I was trying to see what I was looking at and all that stuff. I suddenly realized the class had gone quiet, and I looked up and found that the whole class was looking at me, which was slightly unnerving. It's like, how long has it been quiet, and how long have you all been staring at me? But what had happened is the instructor, who later became quite a good friend of mine, he called their attention, the attention of the class, to me. He said, "Look at this guy, watch him paint. because I used to be more so, I'm still fairly active behind the canvas and pacing back and forth as I stare at it. And he said, look at this guy. The way he's staring at the canvas as he works and pacing back and forth, he looks like, he looks just like the leopards at the zoo as they pace back and forth and look out at you through the bars, as if to say, if these bars weren't here, I'd be tearing your arms off right now. And that's the kind of intense engagement I have when I'm art making. That's not passive, floaty, hobby thing. You know, that's a battle. And it's still that way for me to this day. So I do this because I have to, not because it relaxes me.
Well, it's interesting as well. I mean, you're painting the creator of all, right? So that's the, you know, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and so it's fascinating that, you know, that's one thing. I mean, I do some woodworking. I did a lot of metal shop growing up, and so just different forms of art. You know, I mean, and there's something about
it's creation.
You know, exactly. So when you're able to, you know, like some of my kids will be like, well, you know, I mean, I also do automotive work, so I used to build engines and things, and so, you know, there's something about taking something that's not functional and then, you know, making it work or improving it, or, you know, just being able to do something your own with your own hands.
Yes.
And then to be able to see a finished product in it. You know, I mean, even things like plumbing or you know, I did an HVAC system in our house. I replaced the HVAC system. I got licensed and, you know, went through, I watched a million YouTube videos, and I took all the knowledge that I already had, and then, you know, was able to then go and replicate that based off of the knowledge that I had of those things. And it's, you know, so I mean, it's interesting that, you know, like it's just that power of creation. And when you're doing, you know, when you're doing art, you know, as well, it's that same power of creation, just in a different medium. And so it's fascinating to me that, you know, I mean, that those things, you know, I think it's an innate thing that's built into all of us, that we want to create and we want to,
I think so.
You know, contribute and you know, and through that we, you know, we glorify God and we expand our talents and things. So I think that's a really fascinating, you know, aspect of it as well.
One thing I love about it, because I've done some woodworking, I've done some metalworking, I learned to use a welder when I worked in a bronze art foundry. And one of the things that's so cool about all that is so many things that seemed mysterious and magical, you become capable of.
Right.
You know, it's like, how did that table come to be? How did that pile of lumber get transformed into this functional, beautiful thing that I can now introduce into my life and makes my life better, and, you know, all those kinds of issues, you know, until when you don't know, it's all kind of magical, made by mysterious people with secret knowledge, and it's just, it's a mystery and it's magic. You know, like the sword from the stone, you know, taking, crushing stone, extracting iron ore, smelting the ore, forging it into a sword, you know, that's magic.
Yeah.
Until you know how to do it. And now, after that, you go around, you look at the stack of wood or the pile of rock, you go, oh yeah, I know what I can do with that. No problem.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. And one of the things that I have taught people before, I can't even say I've dabbled in teaching art before, it's more like I've bumped into it occasionally. A lot of people get really focused on getting the line right the first time, right? Yeah. And because they're nervous, because they're intense about their intention, you know, the muscles tense up and you grip your pencil hard and you press into the paper hard. And you add these deep grooves into the paper that and pencil lives at the bottom of. Well, if you hold your pencil further back, you lose that fine motor control. And if you can consciously relax your arm and make marks like this, just relax and kind of scrubby things. The line you want is in there. And as you look at the mass, you can, highlight it like, okay, it's more of this. It's not so much this, it's more of this. And you start zeroing in. It's a little bit like ready, fire, aim. Take a shot and then start adjusting fire. And don't worry so much about crushing in the right thing the first time. Because I'll tell you what, when you make those deep grooves in the paper, you can't erase those, can you?
No.
The eraser won't get down there. So now you're stuck with that line that you don't like anymore. So hold your pencil further back and try to relax your shoulder, relax your wrist. And just trust the process, or trust me when I tell you the line you want is in there. We'll winkle it out over time.
So that's good advice. That's kind of interesting. How much softer, like you were talking about before, in the soft lines, that's on there. But
in the critique.
Yeah, in the critique, and then just in looking at what you're doing versus Amanda. Now, obviously, this, like I said, this is the first time she's ever done this.
Yeah,
and
fair,
so,
fair. Let's be fair.
It's no, knock on Amanda at all. It's just the what experience does, and like when you're, how, like just along the jawline and things that she did there on the right side, how it's, like a deeper, heavier line a little bit, but it's taking shape, and then as she continues to develop it, and she, just that piece of advice of just holding the pencil farther back, right? So that, just little things that if you don't do it, right, you don't know. And then as you kind of get more into where you're at, then you can move up on the pencil, I'm assuming, where you kind of find that line.
Yeah, because I've become accustomed to mentally forcing my body to relax, right? Because I've done it so many times, I don't tense up in the first place in the same way. But Amanda, do you remember what I said to you the first time I saw your work and complimented you on it? And I believe I made a comment about, do you know what, I believe I asked you, do you know what the difference is between where you're at and where I'm at?
Yes.
What did I say?
I think you talked about you had more experience or something along those lines.
So yeah, that was the idea. I said the difference between where I'm at and where you're at is 300.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's kind of an arbitrary number. I made 300 portraits or so. That's the difference between where you're at and where I'm at. Make 300 portraits and then tell me you're no good. Mm-hmm. Or compare it to where you're at now. You're gonna be better. You're gonna do it more confidently. You're gonna do it faster. You're gonna know that what you're doing is working and why it's working. And that's actually an interesting story that's worth telling. When I didn't paint until I went to art school. I was a comic book drawer guy.
Oh, wow, okay.
And that was what I thought I wanted to do. And I never painted anything until I got to art school. And they weren't terribly good at teaching me what to do with the stuff. They were very much more of the modern artist type thing. Just vomit your emotions on the canvas, do what you feel, and that makes it art, and rubbish like that.
Yeah.
And my visions have always looked like the kind of finished products that I'm getting now. And so there was a long time where there was a very frustrating disconnect between my vision and the results I could produce consciously and know what. So it was, for a long time, it felt like I was groping in the dark, right? if I did something that worked, I wasn't sure why it had worked. And so I didn't feel confident I could repeat it. If something wasn't working, I wasn't sure what was going wrong, so I didn't know how to avoid it. The thing that cracked the code was when I switched to portrait painting, because previous to that, I just painted whatever I felt like.
Right.
So, epic religious scene one day, next piece was a portrait, next piece was a still life of flowers. I was bouncing all over the place, whatever struck my fancy. When I started disciplining myself to do the same type of thing over and over again, that's when the darkness started to lift. That's when the code started to crack. Because what it revealed, by almost a scientific process, by narrowing down the parameters,
Right.
I'm dealing with basically the same type of painting over and over again. So it's got all these things in common, and because over time all those things were constant, what was going wrong became more obvious. What was working became more obvious.
So were you able to branch that out into other things, or have you just pretty much stuck to portraits?
No, but portraits are what cracked the code for me. And now I've cracked the code, so I can apply what I've learned to painting anything.
Right.
But it was by exercising the discipline initially of only portraits that the code was cracked. So again, kind of the scientific method, just isolate the parameters, isolate the variables, or reduce the variables.
Right.
And so, which is really hard for artists because we're so seduced by the muse. The seduction of the what if with a capital I. And we just, this thing. And frequently it's just a part of the thing. It's like, that I and all the other bits that give it context. But it's really that I, or whatever, that flower.
Right, you get hyper focused on on something, and then you forget the forest. You kind of can't see the forest for the tree.
Yes, that's really a very easy thing to happen.
So that's another method, like just how you kind of. I think especially as you're beginning or you're trying to learn a new method, it's really, or you're trying to do it, like you said, just really do it right. Just do it all right versus, like getting the sketch in and then coming back and
refining it
and then refining it.
Yeah.
Versus like you were talking about that like hard line of doing it.
Or, like I said earlier, great book title. I haven't read this book yet, but Ready, Fire, Aim.
Yeah.
And being in the Army, that's particularly relevant to you. You're just get as close as you can, take a shot, figure out where it landed, now adjust fire.
Right. Dial it in.
Exactly. Walk it in on the target.
Exactly.
Instead, and relieve some of the stress of having to be perfect on target the first time. Until your sights are aligned and everything's dialed in, you have no way of being on target.
Right.
Here's a bit that I may have become unconscious to, and so call it out or ask questions. I'm filling in some of the blanks from references with what I know is there because I know my anatomy. It's like how much of that is just me knowing what's there, even if it's not in the picture, versus
just knowing it's there.
Yeah, that's something I don't know if I can become conscious of exactly, or I could question it. Like, hey, why are you doing that? Oh yeah, that might not be obvious to other people.
Yeah.
Really? That's weird. Why can't other people see?
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like what you were talking about with what Amanda did with the teeth and the mouth. Right?
Yeah.
So
perfect example right there. Most people, teeth are white. I want my teeth to be white. I whiten my teeth. That kind of thing. And so, like glistening, glowing, popping out at you. Whereas observed reality is like, the teeth are behind lips, and the lips are only slightly parted, and there's side light. There's almost no direct light hitting the teeth. They're like in shadow.
Right.
They're gray. They're medium gray. They're dark gray. And painting them that color makes them look real, because that's what teeth really look like when they're in shadow.
Right.
You know, so yeah, Amanda's observational abilities are just amazing.
You messing up on the eye.
Okay, go back to use the grid. Work the grid.
I know.
Don't draw a symbol of eye. Just start by doing hash marks of where the details intersect. And this is, you know, it's kind of washed out. It's a monochromatic thing in this picture, and that may be one of those places where I'm filling in the blanks with what I know is there, as opposed to what you can see there. So keeping your hand loose is going to help. You're pretty close to being there. I mean, the corner of the right eye pretty much hits the corner of this square, right? Just do a little mark there. And then the top edge of the eyelid is a little less than halfway up in the middle of the box. And the other corner of the eye is just inside the corner. Right? And the eyes are not a perfect almond shape. Yeah, you got it. So there's like the corner where we get the crusty bits when we wake up. And then it turns up at a steeper angle and then levels off and turns down into a gentler sweep. And the bottom lid has a slightly opposite curve. So they're not even curves, they're more complicated curves. And there's the eye flap that hovers over that and then creates this deep part that catches shadow. Then there's this pink wet flesh inside of the corner of the eye that's different from the eyeball. So that kind of rounds out that bit. And then the pupil, in this case he's looking straight on, is roughly in the middle of that. It's kind of a fish shape, the opening of the eye, a little bit. It's kind of almond shaped, but it's also kind of fish shaped. And so, you know, think of Dory from Finding Nemo. So you got your little pouty lips on Dory, and you got your little fishy fins. And
that's so cute.
right. You know, that's kind of the eye shape. It's not so much of an almond. It's a little bit more of a fish.
I feel like I just keep making like too high.
Nope, they're right in the right place.
All right. Thank you.
So when you apply there's no need to, the oil just will go over there's no problem with the graphite combination with it, or do you have to like kind of clean it sort of to move through the painting?
Well, actually there is, the oil paint will pick up the pencil. Graphite is slightly sticky and it's slightly smeary, and so.
So, I mean, Amanda does a lot of, just graphite art,
Yeah.
like drawing, and you never really worked with oil, right, Amanda?
Never.
So what we'll do is, after we finish our drawings, we'll put a coat of clear gesso over
Okay.
it, transparent gesso. Just the white on the canvas is gesso.
Right.
Gesso is a ground. It's paint mixed with clay powder, and it creates a barrier that prevents the oil from soaking through the canvas to the other side.
Okay.
And so that's the ground. I have a transparent gesso. So when it gets painted over the pencil will smear, you'll get some streaks, but it's okay. It'll all be protected under the barrier of the gesso.
Okay.
Then the oil paint, and you can see everything you drew. The oil paint will go on top of that, and
I see.
they won't intermix. I had to
Gotcha.
learn that the hard way.
See, I mean, it's just little things like that, especially when it's a new medium for her, right? So she's never
Yeah.
done oil.
Little technical things
And then,
like that.
so little technical things are like where, where that comes in.
Yeah, like I said, they didn't teach a whole lot of certain things where I went to school. So, give us a shopping list of all these art materials to get. But they never told us how to use them. They never said, don't mix this with that, because bad things will happen, because you talk all kinds of solvents and chemicals, right? Nobody ever told me, take a little bit of your solvent, your mineral spirits or your whatever, and mix just a little bit with the paint, and it thins it out just enough that it flows off the brush a little easier and moves around it. I had to learn that by doing, which meant I learned some weird habits, because I was a comic book artist, but I'd also always played with clay.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Oil paints, depending on the color, some of them are like room temperature butter and some are stiffer, a lot stiffer. And I learned to just muscle the paint around the canvas. Destroyed brushes, I still do, because it's how I learned how to paint.
Right.
I buy cheap brushes because I'm just totally abusive to them. Because a lot of the time, I don't use solvents to soften the paint and let it move easier. I muscle it like I did from the beginning,
Okay.
like I'm moving clay.
Right, interesting.
I do use solvents now, but I still use the bad habit that emerged because nobody taught me what to do with this stuff
Right.
has also become part of my process, but also part of the results I get. Some of my special effects in the results that I get,
Yeah.
the way I get a certain appearance, like the fur collar on Rembrandt,
Right.
is a direct product of not knowing what I'm doing with this stuff and figuring it out and doing it
Interesting.
wrong.
So it just gives it a different
Yeah,
texture, a different,
yeah.
like a different signature even.
Yeah, some of my
A little bit
bad
more
habits led to some of the unique special effects that I can produce that otherwise don't.
Right.
And so,
It's interesting.
yeah, it is.
So do you mind if I mention some other artists that I've watched on YouTube? Or so one that is pretty fascinating is Mark Carden. Are you familiar with Mark Carden? Hyperrealism. He does a channel called Draw Mix Paint, and he does hyperrealisms. He's done like presidential portraits and stuff like that.
Hang on just a minute. You're doing great. It looks like everything's pretty much in the right place. Leave it alone.
Got it.
I think you're just right. There's no need to obsess about it. So finish it. Okay, I'm talking about the eyes.
Oh yeah.
The mouth, that's just a little bit wider, but some of that cast shadow is cast by the mustache, not the corners of the mouth. So your corners of the mouth are pretty spot on. Corners of the mouth, generally speaking, with most people, line up in a straight line down from the eye. So the middle of the eye, drop straight down, and that's right about where the corners of the mouth are going to be. And so you were really close, and some of that deep shadow that I've got is from the mustache. Because like the eyelid, the mustache comes out off the face and casts a shadow.
Yeah.
So if you just describe the cheekbones a little bit, and yes, this is me filling in the blanks that you can't see. I know where the edge of the beard is. So the edge of the beard is right around here. So the cheek, call it dental drum.
Really?
Yeah, this shape right where the teeth are, and you get this hollow in the cheeks. It's under the nose. You know what barrel of monkeys is?
Yeah.
Imagine the barrel from a barrel of monkeys. It's going to be right there in the face, and that's the dental drum.
Okay.
So there's kind of a barrel of monkeys form right in here, and then the cheekbones that connect to that, and the chin comes off of that.
Okay.
And that's where you get the hollow of the cheeks.
Got it. Thank you. So I'll just.
And so I mean, you could look at my beard, for instance, because you can't really see it from the sculpture. So there's a tuft of hair that grows along the bottom of the lip. It kind of creates a triangle shape.
Oh, okay.
And there's
Like little.
sometimes, not always, but there's a little bit of a bare patch of skin on either side of that, just under the corner of the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And beards, they have cowlicks, and like my beard, it's all swoopy to one side. In the sculpture, I have his like Semitic peoples and Levantine peoples. The men tend to be heavy bearded, and stuff, like the beard's growing up to the cheekbones and it's growing down the neck, and that's one of the disadvantages of this being monochrome clay thing. So just give yourself some indications of where these details are going to be. The beard is going to roughly follow the bottom, the edge of the cheeks, right? And then you're going to have a little patch of skin. Some men are so heavy bearded that that's not there; it's just solid. And, one thing you notice with beards, like the cowlicks, the mustache, one side will curl that way, the other side curls in that way, and I put that on the sculpture, so like this side swoops up a little bit and this side kind of swoops down a little bit, and that's just, again, observational, partly living with a beard. You're like, oh yeah, it does that thing. So you're really close. I would say let's concentrate on the shoulders and the mass of the body.
Got it. And leave that alone.
Yeah, I think you've got enough to start with.
And so just like make it all go down.
Yeah.
Alright.
You want to get the, kind of where you're at with the lines on it.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be too precious about it. I mean, that part especially. I mean, you know what clothes are like. Like, this is 2 or 3 times as thick because the cloak is folded over itself. And so this is 1 layer of fabric. This is 3 because it's wrinkled and, all that fun stuff that makes it interesting. And I get the cloak come down there. This is a great example of, you don't have to be too precious with this. It's not like an eye. The eye doesn't slide to the left or the right with gravity, but fabric does do that.
So did you do this sculpture?
I did.
Is it that one I did?
Yes.
So
Oh, you made that sculpture?
isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, everything in here is my work.
Wow, that's amazing.
How are you feeling about this, Amanda?
I feel done.
You feel done?
Um,
I think there's enough to make this work, so.
all right then.
All right.
Okay.
And we will
Very
call
good.
that done and ready for the next thing.
Yay.
Yay.